Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
I'm your host, Richard Costello, and today I'm pleased to introduce Karen Sweet. Karen is currently Senior Manager, Financial Services and Canadian Real Estate Practice Lead with Accenture. Karen has over 15 years of experience in consulting, asset management and finance, and has worked for leading groups including Westfield and Oxford Properties. Karen is an expert at delivering large-scale technology and innovation transformations within the commercial real estate industry. Karen has a BA from the University of Guelph and an MBA, Finance and Strategy, from the University of Rochester. A lifelong problem solver, idea generator, and value creator. Karen, a big welcome to you and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So let's begin by hearing about your career journey so far, Karen. You majored in English and math from Guelph. At the time of enrolling at university, what career path did you have in mind at that time, and how did you end up working in real estate?
Well, not dissimilar to others, I'm sure. I went into university without any idea what I wanted to do when I got out. As you might be able to tell from English, math, I took a little bit of everything. I quickly realized I was going to have to be a little bit more refined if I wanted to be successful in a career, which is part of what led me back to my MBA. And the real estate part, I think when we look at people in our industry, there's a lot of us in similar situation where I kind of fell into real estate. Real estate found me. I didn't find it. I finished my MBA and I was on the job market. I knew I was interested in a field or an area that gave me a lot of autonomy, a lot of opportunity to set a long-term career path and to do some problem solving and a variety of tasks similar to university, where I didn't want to pigeonhole myself right away. And I got a call from a recruiter and he said, "Hey, I'm recruiting for this organization. They're called Westfield. It's real estate. They own malls. Are you interested?" And I honestly, at the time, didn't have a clue what he was talking about, but I looked into it. And I thought, yeah, this is really interesting. It was framed basically that they wanted to bring in people who had business acumen and the potential to set those long-term career paths and teach them from the ground up. And the role was an assistant general manager at a mall. So come into a mall, work at the shopping mall, be on the ground out there doing all the little pieces that have to be done to support the operations of that mall and to try and develop that career over time. So that's what I did. I landed in New Jersey at Westfield Garden State Plaza, which is a pretty big mall just outside of New York City in Paramus, and was kind of split my time between there and another mall on Long Island, and really grew up within the company. And it was one of those scenarios where I didn't know what I was getting into at the time. But once I was there, I looked around and kind of went, yeah, this works for me. And so it was kind of a really good break for me to end up where I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. So were you intending to stay on in the US after you graduated with your MBA?
Yeah, I mean, I was hopeful that I'd be able to stay there, at least to start off. The way it works is if you finish a master's, you get a year to work on the same visa. And the goal is, of course, then to find an organization that will help sponsor you through the visa process if you're not a US citizen. And that's exactly what happened. So I managed to stay in the US. I really enjoyed the time that I spent there. It was a great learning experience. It was definitely different than any work experience I'd had before then. And, I think for me, it was less about whether or not it was in the US, but more about whether or not I was working for a great organization. And I was really found a great fit with Westfield, especially for the time of life that I was in. Real estate can often lead to moving around, especially on the property side where you have to be at different properties. So I worked in three different states, lived in 4 different states while I was there, moving down from New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, back up to New York, and then to Pennsylvania. So it was the right time of life to be doing that, and having those different experiences.
That sounds like a really fun few years, and pretty neat to think it all came off the back of a chance encounter with a recruiter as well. That's very cool. So, Karen, I'm actually interested in hearing more about your experience working for Westfield. So, I did a bit of research and I found out that Westfield were founded in 1960 and they had their origins in the western suburbs of Sydney, Australia. The company entered the US in 1977 and would go on to build considerable holdings in California and on the East Coast. In 2014, the group split into two independent companies, Centre Group, which now owns and operates the Australian and New Zealand shopping centre portfolio, and Westfield Corporation, which continues to own and operate the American and European shopping centre portfolio. So I spent a year recruiting in Sydney, Australia, and became quite familiar with the business, at least the Centre Group business. But they don't have a presence in Canada, and many of our listeners might be unfamiliar. So what, in your opinion, do Westfield do well?
That's a really good question. Um, you know, what I found in working there was that they were always very, very forward thinking. They were an early adopter of some of the technologies that come out. They were always very customer focused, and when I say customer, it was very much that shopper focus from a very early stage. So a lot of the things that we were doing and a lot of the ways that we were focusing on driving value and driving business was very focused on that end consumer. When I talk about the technology focus, we were using a lot of data and analytics even back in 2008, 2009, when I was working there. We already had, for example, a full lease administration workflow system that was automated and locked in on technology, which I know is something that's still aspirational for some organizations today. But they were very much focused on how can we be lean, how can we be focused on the customer, and how can we deliver really great value, and not just great value, but really innovative and interesting products. So some of the developments that we worked on there were very new. I remember one of the ones that was done in the U.S. in California was the very first time they'd ever had, say, a Neiman Marcus and a Target at the same mall, because previously people hadn't thought that way. Again, back when I was there, we were talking about the whole concept of shopping center anchored by grocery stores, which was completely foreign at the time, but it was actually put out there as a challenge. First person to do this gets a big prize. And so all of us were competing internally to try and be the first one to land that grocer. And so there was all sorts of really great alignment of incentives to get people thinking that way. Really strong ownership mentality. When I was running a shopping mall, and keep in mind, this was one of my first jobs out of my MBA program. I was not seasoned in any way, but I was basically told, go run it. This is your business. Go run it. Call us if you need us, but this is for you to do. And I think that was really, it was great for someone like me who wanted to take that ownership and who wanted to have that kind of autonomy. But it's also can be a bit of a risk, but I think it paid off for them because it attracted the kind of person who wanted to really run with things and be challenged and take those risks. And so it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, awesome. So what were the biggest takeaways, would you say?
Um, I think for me, a lot of it came down to take smart risks, stand up for the things that you believe in. A little anecdote, we were in a budget meeting one time, and I was getting pushback from senior leadership about the amount of money I'd put in my budget for roof repairs. And typically, when you're getting pushback, and this was not like my immediate boss, this was 3 levels up talking to me about, why do you need this much money for roof repairs? And I believe he said, I'll just get up on the roof and fix it myself for a quarter of that. And I leaned over and I kind of said, that's fine. Which union local would you like to join before you do that? And he stopped and he looked at me and he said, all right. And he put a check mark next to it. And that was it. And so I learned that I had to speak up, but I also had to speak up with good reasons. But that if I had good reasons and if I had good grounding in what I wanted to do and what I needed to do, if I had the data to support me, I would be supported in those decisions.
Karen, you charted a fairly unique path in the industry by starting out in shopping center management, becoming a director of finance, and then you moved up to a regional operations role. So, what motivated you to go this route? And perhaps comment on how this experience helped you perform in both a finance and operations capacity.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned this as a unique path. I think that's pretty fair. I haven't found as many people who have sort of moved about in the same direction as I have. I like to look back on the moves that I've made, though, and the consistent piece for me has been that it's about filling another gap that I believe contributes to what my long term career plans have been. So when I look at my experience with Westfield, certainly I got a broad range of experiences within that organization, but they were all focused around shopping center management. So that's a single asset class. And within real estate, that's only one piece of the puzzle. So I recognized that if I was looking ahead, I needed to think about other things that I needed to learn and ways that I could develop to give me that broad range of experiences that I felt would be important as I moved up in my career and as I took different opportunities. In addition, when I made the transition from Westfield to Oxford, there were also a lot of personal reasons why I was exploring different opportunities. My husband was finishing a PhD. We were both looking at different markets to figure out which ones would suit both of our career trajectories. Looking back on the answer we talked about before, I was no longer in a position where it made sense for me to be bouncing around the country, every 6 to 12 months. I now had a young child, I had a husband, I had a whole lot of differences in my own personal life as well. So while I was exploring the different markets and the different possibilities and doing some of that research, the opportunity with Oxford presented itself, and it really fit that gap that I was looking for. It was another organization like Westfield that was at the very top of its game. The role itself was interesting to me because it was back on that operational front, but at a higher level than I'd been operating before in operations. It was with an office portfolio, which was something I'd never really tried. And the organization itself was very different from Westfield in terms of the fact that it was diversified. It was Canadian based, but with a large international growth trajectory. It was a highly diversified asset class, and it had a really interesting approach to the investment and growth portfolio. So for me, it really twigged my interest because I could see myself learning a lot there, developing a lot there, um, and getting great exposure to a different way of working that would be the flip side of what I'd gotten from Westfield in a very good way. And it also fit from a personal standpoint as well, with Toronto being such a great market, and the stability that was offered as well, because real estate in Canada requires a little less flying around the country when you start in Toronto, and especially with that regional portfolio being located in the GTA. So it really ticked all the boxes that I was looking for, both personally and professionally at the time. Um, when you ask me about how the experience helped me perform, I think a lot of where I've grown and developed has focused around the different people I've been exposed to. So whereas it was a little bit more learn on the go with Westfield, there's a lot of opportunity with being in the head office for Oxford to learn from those people at the organization who had a lot to offer. So my direct boss, who'd been in the business for many, many years and was able to share that experience with me and help guide me in learning the side of the office portfolio. My colleagues and peers and the people in the other areas within Oxford, they all provided different insights that I was able to learn from them because I was in that close proximity. So that difference was very beneficial to me in getting a little bit more of that hands-on guidance and understanding of the broader real estate industry as a whole.
That's an interesting comment you make about learning from those around you. I can't help but think about the current discussion that's happening at the moment around, will the office survive COVID-19, and what will the new normal look like for the office sector? And I just think that that's such a huge part of office life, is learning from those around you, whether it's the chance collisions, as they say, in the corridor, or just hearing somebody on the phone handling a difficult conversation or whatever it might be. And for anybody in the formative stages of their career, it's just a massive part of personal development. It's just being around people and learning, soaking all of that up. So anyway, just an interesting aside. I guess this chapter of your career with Westfield and Oxford Properties is pre your consulting experience. So when you look back on that chapter of your career, what would you say is your proudest moment?
So that's a really great question. And I've been very lucky that I've had several moments where I've been able to take real pride in what I've done. I think that the real estate industry by itself is a rare industry in that accomplishments and contributions can be very tangible. You can actually see your work coming out of the ground, literally, as you go. I have a friend who still teases me because I would point out a building, or I would say, that's my building or that's my mall.
Yeah.
And he would tease me and say, you don't own that. But at my heart, I felt like I did. And I think that's part of what it makes it so rewarding, because even though I was part of a bigger team, it's not my personal building, but being able to see something that's being built or renovated or redeveloped, and to know that you had a hand in that and a say in that is really huge. And I think, so when we talk about proudest moment, one of the ones that was most unique to me, I think, was related to the work that I did with Westfield World Trade Center, which was right before I left Westfield. I had been doing, as the director of finance, I'd been doing a lot of the work on the financial models related to Westfield with that project. And I'd been working with really complicated spreadsheets and 99-year water flow models and leverage models and all of these different pieces. It's making me go cross-eyed just thinking about it again. but it was a really complex project, and it did get nailed down that this would be going forward before I left the organization. I'd already told them that I would be leaving, and our team from LA was coming out to actually walk the site, which was under construction. So they were pouring cement. They were really at the very rough stages of getting things done. And I was able to go even still and walk this site when it was still just concrete and cement mixers and dump trucks. And I walked with some of our design team who had shared, obviously, the drawings when we were going through that financial modeling that we were using to create those models, and walking around with my colleague, Hannah. And she would point things out to me and say, this is where this is going to be, and this is where this is going to be. And it was just fascinating to me to walk around and see the actual tangible results of that work we'd been doing and how it was coming together. And to be with someone who literally could look at a concrete slab and see what that store would look like and be able to express that to me. And of course, I left shortly thereafter. It was under construction for many years. And it was almost exactly 1 year ago that I was able to go and actually visit the completed site. So I remember going there with my kids and my nephews and walking through it and getting an ice cream cone. And I took a picture of them. And then I said, I want someone to just take a picture of me standing here, because I want to have this kind of as that closeout from that picture of me wearing the hard hat and the safety vest.
Yeah.
Back in 2011, which was when I walked the site. And so kind of bookended that experience. And even though I left when it was at the early stage of the construction, I still when I walked near it, I was kind of like, I have a hand in that. There's a little piece of me in that building.
It's such a cool building. I went there 3 years ago, I think, with my brother. He came over from the UK, and Phil's an architect, so he was pretty fascinated to check it out. And they have that one section, I think it's the Oculus, and it looks like you're inside sort of the belly of Moby Dick with these sort of huge rib cage type structure. It's really, really very neat. So yeah, I can imagine why you'd be proud of that.
Are you looking for a trusted recruiter who lives and breathes Canadian real estate? At Highview, we bring over 20 years of recruiting experience to help steer you in the right direction. We are passionate about your success in this industry, so we will arm you with the important information and give you the tools to make the best choice. Contact Highview Partners today to discover how we can connect you to people who perform.
So Karen, moving on a little bit, what would you say are your professional passions and how do they motivate you in the workplace?
So I'd say there's really two that resonate with me. First of all is finding new and better ways to do things. So I'm one of those people who comes in and says, there's got to be a better way. Um, and then I try to find it. I had a friend once say, if you're stressed at work, and this was at a very stressful time, if you're so stressed, why don't you just take an easier job? And I said, it wouldn't be an easier job once I took it. I'd still go in there and say, well, this has to be fixed and try to fix it. So it's part of who I am. I can't walk into a room, I can't walk into a project and not think, can't we make this just a little bit better? So, which is why I don't go into my kids' rooms anymore. But that's, that's the way I approach things. And the second part for me is about people and developing people. I love watching people grow up in business. I love feeling like I've contributed in some way to seeing someone else's success. I love seeing other people achieve success and follow their dreams. I'm still in touch with a number of people who I've worked with over the years. I got a note like 3 months ago, maybe, from a young woman who I brought in when I was at Westfield. She was the niece of one of my friends from my MBA program. And she was just graduating from her undergrad degree program. And I recommended her for a role in a customer service position at one of our malls. And she started there and she grew up and she's now a VP of real estate in New York City. So I saw her doing this online type video of how they were managing things with their portfolio during COVID-19 in New York City, because she was one of the people that they tapped to be out there presenting this. And I just look at her and what she's doing now, and she's super successful. And I don't take credit for any of the hard work and dedication she's put in. But she sent me a note a few months ago and basically said, if you hadn't recommended me for that role and seen that I could be successful in real estate, I would not have pursued real estate. And now here she is, living the dream with her family in New York City and just successful and happy and fulfilled and, continuing along that path. And it was really important. I got this message completely unexpectedly. And that's the kind of thing that just makes me really happy. And that's one of the things that keeps me going through challenging times.
Yeah, that's really nice. And it's rewarding to think about the impact that that's had on somebody's life. Yeah, it's lovely. And I think that's one of the most rewarding parts about my job too in recruitment is placing somebody in a role or recommending somebody, maybe giving them an extra push to your client during that interview process. And then you see them go on to secure that role and do great things in that company and see their career grow. It's super rewarding for me too. Okay, well, let's get into your job right now then, Karen. What can you tell us about your current employer, Accenture?
So Accenture is a global organization. We have more than 500,000 employees worldwide. We do work in strategy and management consulting, but we're also known as a leader in digital and technology with a very broad range of tech partners, and we're leaders in cutting edge technology solutions. So that's the organization as a whole. And we really believe in pulling together teams of people for our clients that really bridge those different gaps between industry knowledge and technology expertise or functional expertise to make sure that we're really delivering value for our clients.
Awesome. And what would you say sets Accenture apart from your competition?
So I see several differentiators, but I think the first is that we're truly global. We're a single organization, not multiple country branches under an umbrella. But what that means is that when I reach out to a colleague in New York or Chennai or London, we can start collaborating and finding solutions for clients right away. So we don't have to start with a conversation about whose bottom line is carrying it or negotiate for how we're going to bring that person in from that area. It's really a question of, here, I have a question. Great. How can I help? We're also technology agnostic. We're unbound by audit relationships, which means that when we're working with our clients or to find solutions, we're really able to focus on what those best options are because we can look at the entire breadth of options there. And I know everyone always says it's the people. I mean, anyone who's happy in their job is going to tell you they work with great people, but because that's really what makes it great. But I really do feel that at Accenture we have just such an incredible group of talented people who have such a passion to create and deliver. Over the course of the time I've spent at Accenture, I can and I have multiple times reached out to people with a question or an idea, and the first response I always get is, "How can I help?" I'll bring any idea to someone and their response is immediately, "Sounds great. How can I help? Let's find a time to sit down and talk." And I could think of it as, well, I'm in this role, I'm leading the Canadian practice. Maybe that's why people are doing this, but it's not me. It's not my role. I see all the time very senior leaders sitting down and chatting with brand new analysts and encouraging them to come to them and encouraging them to bring ideas forward. And so it really is a place where you can make your own path and where you can make your own direction. And that mentality of how can I help, I think that really helps our organization make sure we bring our best to every scenario, because we are open to finding that right fit and finding that right knowledge base and curiosity.
That sounds great. And what is it that you're doing then?
So, as we mentioned, I'm the Canadian real estate lead. It's a newer practice for us here in Canada. So part of what I'm doing right now is trying to raise awareness of the capabilities that we have as an organization and what we can do to contribute to the industry. So part of what I've been doing has been looking into some of those capabilities that we've been using in other global markets, looking at some of the capabilities that we use in other industries, and figuring out how we translate that so that it works really well for the real estate industry. And to that point, communicating that to people within the industry to let them know that we're a viable alternative and that we have the ability to do that. One of the things that I found out after I joined Accenture was that we have a team of 1,000 full-time employees in Chennai who do finance and lease administration, BPO services globally. So we're one of the leading players in the real estate industry for those BPO services. And I didn't know that. And I've always been in real estate. And so I came in and I found this out and I went, wait a second, what is going on here? How did I not know this? And I also found out that we have an incredible smart cities and smart buildings practice. So a lot of these things that I knew about and that I'd worked with other vendors or I'd heard about in industry events and all of these other places. And I hadn't seen Accenture's name on it. And I wasn't sure if that was just in Canada. Of course, some of it was just in Canada. But I recognized that this was something that we needed to really think about and bring forward. So that's part of what I've been doing, is making sure that I fully understand our capabilities, which I think at this point I'm pretty aware of them. I hope so. And then the second part is making sure that that's being expressed and communicated out there to our potential clients.
And what specific projects are you working on at the moment, Karen?
So a lot of the projects I've been working on recently have really had an eye towards data and analytics. So whether that's on the physical side with IoT and smart buildings, or whether that's exploring AI, artificial intelligence, and robotic process automation, looking at ways to create more robust analytics for decision making. I think within the industry, we've seen a lot of people going from, say, a more decentralized stores of data where they might be on the property site or regionally held, to trying to take a look at that wealth of data that organizations have, putting it in order, figuring out what's useful and how to use it, and figuring out how to get more of that information so that you can make better decisions and get better outcomes. So a lot of the projects I've been involved in have involved looking at whether there are platforms that people need to use, whether it's a data architecture structure that we're helping with, or whether it's putting in something like a BPO where we're saying, we'll take pieces of that off of your plate so that we'll manage that data side so that you can focus on actually using it rather than consuming it.
Yeah. And with all of the disruption that's happening in the workplace in response to the pandemic right now, taking a glass half full outlook, what are some of the opportunities that you see on the horizon for the real estate industry?
I think the opportunity right now really comes down to the willingness to work with the change. I think that what we're experiencing right now is so unusual. I've heard it referred to as like a big global change management exercise. Like this is like a big experiment where we've all had to figure out what we're going to do. But I also think it's a place where we are right now, where we're seeing whether some of the things that we've put in place work for that concept of remote work. Do we have the right technologies? Do we have the right processes? And with respect to the real estate industry as well, do our business models really work well when we consider whether people are going to be physically together? So, thinking about that from an office standpoint, we've seen offices where everyone has offices. We've seen cubicles. We've seen the open concept. And what I find is that not all of these designs have been planned with the end goal in mind. And the opportunity here becomes, before we go back to business as usual, and I don't think anyone's going back to completely business as usual, but before we go back to our plan of how we get people back to work, let's take a step back and think about what is it that we actually want our people to accomplish? What is really going to make them successful? What is going to make the organization successful? Because organizations have different cultures, they have different structures, and the way they use space really needs to align with what that business model is. So if we haven't taken a good look at that business model in a while, and I don't mean the strategy of, the vision statement and those strategy pieces which are important, but once we get that strategy and that business vision statement in line, how are we actually going to execute on that? How are we going to make it work? And how does space play into that? Because now that people have worked from home, some people love it, some people hate it, but everyone's tried it now. So everyone's tried it, and everyone's tried being at the office. So we really need to think about what goes into that decision of who's going to stay at home, who's going to come in. Are we going to have some people have a flex model where they can do both? One of the things that comes to mind is, there's always been that concept that you have to be seen in the office for people to trust that you're doing your work. And that doesn't stick with all organizations. Every organization has its own level of, trust and autonomy. But organizations have had to trust that people are doing their jobs and doing their jobs well. And they've had to rely on completely different metrics than FaceTime to evaluate their people and to evaluate performance. So we've had a real chance to look at that and establish, do I really need people there? How often do I need people in an office? Who should those people be? And which mixes of people may be beneficial? I don't think office goes away. I don't think, physical retail goes away, but I think it's really going to change a lot. And I think one of the moves that we've seen with office space specifically is that it's not as much of a product as it is a service.
Yeah.
It's a way of enabling productivity. It's a way of enabling collaboration. And we've already seen that major tenants are less willing to lock themselves in for such a long-term scenario. They want more flexibility, which is what we've seen with some of the started as co-working spaces, but with the temporary and flex spaces that we've seen, is people want that flexibility. So I think real estate owners need to figure out how they play into that. They'd already started doing a lot of that before, but I think it's going to happen on a larger scale now. And the same thing with retail. It becomes a case of, how do we make sure that people want to have a good experience with us? Which aspects of our business become physical in-person aspects and which become remote aspects of the business? So online shopping, what needs to be done online and what can be done in person? Do you adjust the way you're using store space to account for that? And then on the flip side, industrial, where are we going to store all this stuff as everyone goes virtual with their shopping, right? So there's so many questions to explore, but I think it all comes back to that concept of what is the operating model? What are you trying to achieve? and what are the best ways to achieve it, and how does space fit into that equation?
I like what you said there about it being less of a product and more of a service. And I think for most of the leading owners and operators, they already have that way of thinking. But I'm sure this will just accelerate the need for operators and property management companies to embrace those services and think about how do they enable the productivity of their tenants.
Yeah, well, and it's a bit of a paradigm shift, right? Because it has impacts outside of just that, consumer offering and doing that leasing, because it impacts on your valuation. It's going to impact on your transactions and your property values, right? Because the way we've always calculated that has been on the concept of these leases for this amount of space and the cost of providing that and the cost of operating it. And I foresee big changes in terms of, where operating costs are being spent and what capital is being spent and how it's being spent on these spaces as people change that operating model.
Yeah.
I'm not as, I'm not trying to predict the future, but I'm really curious about seeing it play out. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to maybe play a hand in that and help people figure out how to use space to their best advantage to support their goals.
What one piece of advice would you give to anyone starting out in the real estate industry?
Don't narrow your focus too soon. I think we're seeing a lot of people come into the real estate industry now who know what the industry is, who are not falling into it as so many of us did, and who have an intense focus on it. But I think for anyone in any career, don't get too used to one single path. Learn as much as you can. Volunteer for those extra projects that might be a little bit outside of your scope, because you just have no idea which area is going to resonate with you 10 years from now. And getting that good fundamental grounding of understanding of the industry as a whole is going to help you no matter which direction you go.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, especially about putting your hand up for getting involved in different projects. Because as you say, you never know where they can take you or what skills you might pick up, people you might meet along the way. So yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, before we wrap up, 3 quick fire questions. Number 1, what book do you recommend to your friends most often?
Okay, I can't narrow it down to one.
Okay.
Right now, I'm recommending this to a lot of people. It's called You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. It's by Janelle Shane, and it's about how AI works. And it's super funny because she takes these ridiculous examples about AI trying to learn how to do pickup lines or create Halloween costumes. But it's really funny. But by the end of the book, you actually have a much better understanding of how AI and machine learning work that can be applied at your job, or you can just pick it up for a good laugh. And then the other 2 are, I'm always recommending Lamb by Christopher Moore, which is just a really funny novel. And then the other one is Olive Kittredge by Elizabeth Strout, which is a series of short stories. She's recently put out the sequel, but it's the only book so far that my book club has unanimously decided that they liked. And I've read it more than once. So those are my 3 books. Sorry,
Yeah.
I went over.
No, that's good. Ask the right question there. You're in a book club. That's fantastic. I might have to even put a link to these suggestions. Okay, number 2. What recent purchase up to $100 has improved your life?
Headphones for my children. We're living at home right now, and they have headphones so they can do their work and they can do their videos from their teachers, and they can have their headphones on, and it's all so much better.
Yeah, very smart. Okay, number 3, last one. If you could set up a huge banner anywhere, where would you put it and what would it say?
Where would I put it and what would it say? I would probably I would want to put it somewhere very visible, maybe outside my kids' school, because what it would say is, teachers, thank you, please come back soon.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Karen, thank you very much for your time. Really enjoyed this, and I hope people will find it really, really useful. So appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.